Hello. Today we're gonna have a look at a nice little game, Dominions 5. Now it's a strategy game, turn-based one. It's got some interesting ideas. I'm absolutely rubbish at it, but the basic idea is mythologies are real, well, ish. And they duke it out in a fantasy world to see who becomes the quote-unquote true thing. True faith, rather. We're gonna have a quick game. Probably won't even finish it. I just want to show it off. And we're gonna have a nice little game on Eden. We're going to do an early age game. I'll explain what ages are in just a second, and I think we're gonna play Sauromatia. Just because I practiced this one a little bit, I know more or less what I'm doing. So, ages. You have an early age, middle age, and late age. And it's on scale from high fantasy to low fantasy, but in reality it's all pretty high fantasy. It just makes a difference between in early age you have more magic, less armor. In late age you have more armor, less magic, and middle age is, well, middle ground. I prefer early ages, I think. The nations are a little bit more interesting and there is way more of them. I'm gonna add a couple of players in Unbidden, which is, I think, comes with the game. You don't have to download that one, it's just pre-done for you. It says 4 to 8 players, but 8 is really crowded. Like, everybody's on everybody's doorstep. So, nations run a gambit from historical proxy to completely pulled out of somebody's... yeah. For example, Archocephali, that's your Greek philosophers. Ermor, that's your, well, Roman Empire. And Ulm are your Germanic Vandal tribes. However, Abyssia is more in line with, well, Khorne's Demonkin from Warhammer, if you are familiar with that. And Calum is winged humanoid, you know, throwing lightning everywhere. Citis, I think it is Citis, is Lizardman. And Tirnanog is based on the, I believe, Irish mythology and so on and so forth. You can see a whole bunch of things here. Yeah, including underwater nations and really, full of shit. You know what I mean. We are going to play Sauromatia. Sauromatia, the Amazon Queens. It's an interesting nation, in my opinion. It has few caveats, but we'll get to them. I left the other players on random. It doesn't matter who we play against if I'm just showing off the mechanics. So, Sauromatia is a nation of nomadic warrior tribes ruled by women. Men and women fight alongside, and all the prominent tribes are ruled by queens. Okay, so that makes sense, considering their history, which is laid out in the next sentence. They basically merged with... It was a warrior culture that merged with Amazons, and because Amazons are Amazons, they kind of sort of took over, apart from select few parts of the tribes. Well, the tribe of Androphags, which translates into man-eaters. So, if you're familiar with Warhammer, that can be a little bit grimdark. Dominions, if not exactly on the same level, it nips on the heels. For example, basic chieftains, which are the basic commanders of the Sauromatia. They they use flayed skins of their enemies as a standard to show off their prowess. There is a couple of major gimmicks for Sauromatia. First of all, in their military, you can see it's almost all cavalry horsemen. It's almost all horsemen, apart from the 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 5 units are not horsemen, although, to be fair, you cannot have an army full of horsemen. That wouldn't work, I don't think. Somebody probably gonna prove me wrong. So that's one of their gimmicks. It's pretty much everything in this army is fast, very fast. However, their priests are weak, but can utilize blood sacrifices. I'll explain how that works later on. They are skilled in death magic, nature magic, blood magic, and then some astral magic, which is... it's difficult to explain. It's like a catch-all for mind and stars, really. It's once again like basically Cthulhu type of dealy, and water magic, which is understandable. So we have scouts, which, well, are stealthy, allow you to spy on your neighbors. They are not proper spies, though. That's important distinction there. There is a spy unit you can get in some nations that has a trait that's a spy, and they feed you a lot more information than just basically being in the same province as the enemy. While I have him on the screen, I can try and explain how the statistics work, I suppose. As far as I know, I'm absolutely rubbish at this game. I only have about 28 hours, which is not enough. Definitely not enough. So, hit points, 10, which is standard for a human. Giants have on average 30 and dragons on average 100, so if that gives you a little bit of a scale. Is size 2, so size 1 is a dwarf basically, or a small dog, and it gives you a breakdown here. So human is size 2, horse is size 3, giants are 4, and largest monsters are 5 or 6, so dragons would be 5 or 6 depending on the type. And each square in combat, which we'll get to when we get to combat, has only space enough for 6 points, or 3 humans, with some exceptions. There is always some exceptions. And it says hit locations. It's because the game tracks hits to separate body parts. So the unit can be hit on the leg, on the torso, on the arms. I think both legs and arms are treated as separate. Head and so on and so forth. And you can blind creatures. That's why it says number of eyes. Protection is... I'm not sure how to explain it the best. It basically, I think it subtracts from the weapon from the damage when you get hit. So 5 is, well, it's kind of average. It's not very good, not very bad, but this guy, he's not supposed to be in combat. Magic resistance is like protection, but for magic. There is test that some magic requires you to do if you want to resist the effects. I believe all the tests are done on 2d6 plus the statistic that it takes from. I believe morale. If you fail a morale test, you run. So, morale 9 is slightly below a human soldier, as it says here. Leadership is how many units they can lead, and it breaks down into normal, undead, and magic. You would think undead would be under magic, but they're separate. The control of them is completely different. I'll go over the gold resources and recruitment points when we are actually buying things. Strength 10 is average for a human. Attack 10 is average for a human. Once again, when you are doing attacks and defense and all that, you roll 2d6 and add it to this. Luckily, with the amount of units you can have on the field, computer does it all for you, but we'll take a look at that in a second. Attack and defense skill are, well, what they are. Attack skill determines if you hit something, defense skill means if you defend yourself against it. Is there... yeah. And this guy is pretty average on everything apart from spying. I think combat speed is... yeah, that's also about average, I think. So a unit with combat speed of 10 can almost, not quite, move 10 squares in the same time, at the same time as it takes to do a melee attack. Map move is, well, on that depends how far you can move. And the movement costs depend on the terrain, who holds it, and if it has roads. Obviously, it's more difficult to move through an enemy province than it is your own, and so on and so forth. Encumbrance. Now, that's an interesting one. It ties into the fatigue thing. So, this is basically how much per turn fatigue damage the units take. From one round of combat, it says here. So the more armor you have, the quicker you get tired. And that all comes from... I'm not sure why he has 3, I think that's just basic for him. Basically, for each round of combat, even if he does nothing, he takes 3 fatigue for moving and doing things like that. If fatigue exceeds 100, you fall unconscious. If it goes above 200, you start taking damage from fatigue, like proper damage. It's important in a couple of cases. So you would think this guy, it would take him about 34 rounds of combat to fall unconscious, given no other modifiers. Now, fatigue is important because it's one of the things that manages how magic works. Speaking of magic, the Soothsayer is our first mage with... I say mage. He's a mage-ish. He has 90% chance when recruited to have 1 level of astral magic. And when he casts a spell in combat, he takes an amount of fatigue that the spell does. For each level higher you are than the required level of magic, it lowers the required fatigue. But most spells on level require 20 fatigue, so that takes it down to 5 rounds of combat, or rather 4, considering he already has Encumbrance 4, which means he would be taking 24 fatigue if he casts a spell every turn. We won't be using Soothsayers, they are absolute garbage. Their skills are below average. They cost 55 gold, but as I said, I will go over the gold cost and all that in a minute. And he only has a chance to get a random magic skill. He's old, so he's gonna die on us very quickly. Maximum age, yeah. So every year he has a chance to just kill over and die. He has a fortune teller, which allows you to prevent bad events when he's stationed in a province. It has a much lesser chance of actually doing something horrible. But it's not a very good unit. The best part of the unit, I think, is the actual blurb on the bottom. To summarize it, is Soothsayers are not very good warriors, and because of that they turn to divination to earn their place in the tribe. And if soothsayers are not fully trusted, and if one is suspected by fraud, there is 3 other soothsayers that are called in to do a jury of the peers, as it were. And if the guy is found guilty, he is tied to a wagon along with his family and set on fire. Lovely, ain't it? And obviously there is a little blurb saying that this is sometimes used for political reasons between soothsayers. Our first proper commander is a chieftain, and he has 12 hit points. He's size 3 because he's on a horse. He has 10 protection because of the armor he wears. He has 10 magic resistance, which is like standard for humans. He has a slightly above average morale. He can lead 40 troops. 11 strength, so he's slightly stronger than average. Slightly better at attack than average. Slightly better than average in defense. Actually, I think that brings him up to he's above average for an experienced soldier. He has precision 8, which counts for ranged attacks, which I don't think he has any. Combat speed of 26, so he can move 26 squares per round without doing anything else. Cannot lead any magical or undead troops. He has basic encumbrance 4. The age thing. Basically every winter all your units age by 1, and when they hit max age they become old like the soothsayer was, and they have a chance to just kill over and die. Experience, it's experience, it's quite easy to follow. And his traits bring us to the other thing, the other gimmick that Sauromatia has. Ignore the pillaging. It basically means he can burn down provinces faster than other units. He's inspirational, which means all his troops get +1 to morale, which can be useful. The tattoos. Now, you have to research a magic spell to awaken the tattoos, but when you do, they get a limited invulnerability. I think it's gonna be invulnerability 1, which means they ignore 1 point of damage from like non-magical sources. So pierce, slash, and blunt, they just ignore 1 point of it flat. And the horse tattoo in specific also increases the defense by 1, which would bring him to defense 17, which is quite good. And speed, which might not make much of a difference on speed 26 unit, but that's beside the point. He's armed with a lance, which gives him bonus on a charge, and then he's clad in armor. The Manflayer is the next. He's like an upgraded version of the previous guy, but costs more money and resources. I say upgraded. Yes, his defense is slightly higher, but I think his attack is... No, he is upgraded. He's slower though, because he has a heavier armor, so his protection and defense and all that goes slightly higher. He also has a magic horse tattoo. I'll be honest with you, I do not think I'll be using Manflayers either. And you have warrior queens and warrior priestesses. They're sacred units. I'll go over what that means in a minute. It allows them to take a blessing, but I'll explain that when we are creating our god, basically. Yeah, so they are slightly better than the commanders. They can lead massive amount of troops, but I won't be using them either, I don't think. I'm gonna lean heavily on something completely different. Warrior priestess is a priest, funnily enough. So they can cast blessings, and they can bless themselves, which is... it's okay. It's okay, but it's not amazing, because you really want to be able to awaken those tattoos, and just being a priest is not enough. Then you have spirit guides, which are your cheap what people call research monkeys. So they are the cheapest, I think, guarantee. Yeah, they are cheaper than soothsayers. They have 1 point of magic path, what they call magic path, in death, but it doesn't matter, he won't be using that. He will be using the research that he has. Research of 7, I will be using those heavily to, well, research things. You need to research magic, and we really want to get to that Awaken Tattoo spell. Enari are just upgraded spirit guides. They are, I think, about 3 times or so, 3 or 4 times or so more expensive. They do have more magic paths, but they are slightly better, but I do not think I will be employing them en masse. I mean, they do have over double of research ability, and in a pinch they could do some damage with the Death 2 magic and the Astral. I might see if I can utilize them at some point, but in early game you really suffer for money, I found, at least. Now we are going to move over to a Warrior Sorceress, which is the commander unit I'll be using the most. So they have a Nature Mage level 1 and a Priest level 1, and they are sacred. So the Awaken Tattoo spell requires you to be a Nature Mage and a Priest at the same time. So they will be leading our armies, just because they are able to awaken all those tattoos. And if you see, they have 2 types of tattoos. The sorceresses themselves, they have a horse, which we've seen on the other chaps, and they have a snake, which gives limited invulnerability again. I think they stack, so on a princess, because on the sorceresses, they have 1 horse and 2 snakes, so they will have invulnerability 3, which lets them ignore 3 straight points of mundane damage. And the snake tattoo also grants them magic resistance, which is quite good. They can research. It's alright, probably won't be using them for that often. And they have a random chance to get a, well, it's a 100% chance, so they will always get an extra path. They will either get water, death, nature, or blood. I prefer to get 2 nature on them, just because that lets them cast the Awaken Tattoo spell for less fatigue, and it lets them forge some interesting items, like a Thistle Mace after a certain period of time. Thistle Mace boosts your nature magic by 1, so if they forge one and equip it, it effectively makes them nature magic free, which even lowers the fatigue penalty for a spell even more. The supply bonus comes from the nature magic. Each point of nature magic gives you a supply bonus of 10, which lets you feed 10 human-sized soldiers per turn, which means if you are going into a province with low supplies, if you have plenty of nature mages, you will be fine. As long as your army doesn't exceed their supply bonus, they will never starve. And starving is bad. They're also a combat caster, which allows them to cast cast magic in melee. It also doesn't double their fatigue. I wasn't aware of that. So apparently, when you cast magic, not only you take the fatigue damage from magic, you also double your encumbrance. So yeah, soothsayers are absolute garbage in that case. Never mind. But she only takes the proper, not double, for spellcasting. So yeah, they are pretty good. Combat speed could be higher. They are definitely not as fast as proper horses. And granted, those warrior queens are also sacred, but they cannot bless themselves and they cannot awaken the tattoos on them by themselves. And I think resource-wise, they are not that far apart either. Yeah, 15 gold difference, and much cheaper in resources the sorceresses are. Hydro tamers. They are more cool than they are useful. They basically let you lead monster units, but he can only lead 10. He is poison resistant, which matters with the national animal monster things that we have as Sauromatia, but you won't be using them for one very important reason, and that is Hydras are good on paper, but they're too expensive for what they are. But we'll get to that in a minute. You can see some of the units say can only be recruited in the capital. That means what it says. It can only be recruited in the capital. That's another reason Warrior Sorceress is good, because you can recruit them anywhere. Manflayers can only be recruited in capital, and so can Witch Kings. So Manflayer is a sacred, inspirational commander with a snake tattoo. He rides on a different type of lizard. He's slightly slower than the sorcerers, but they have a poison attack, which can be good, although won't be that important with what we are going to do with our god creation in a minute. And I don't know how long I've been going on for, but that's the minions for you. Now, Witch Kings. Now, they are good, but expensive. And they cannot bless themselves unless you make one of them your prophet. But you have to wait 2 turns before you recruit one, and I'm not sure if it's worth it. Maybe late game when you have a bunch of stuff, and they are recruit capital only, so you cannot exactly pop them up where you need them. So Witch Kings are the guys who introduced flaying of your enemies and then sticking them on a banner to the nation, although they take it slightly further and they actually eat their enemies when they defeat them, supposedly. They have 3 death magic, which is quite powerful, 1 nature, which is useful, 1 blood, which lets you hunt for blood slaves, which, depending on your late game, that may be your winning strategy. And they get a 100% chance random between water, death, nature and blood, and then 10% of getting another one on top of that. So they can be quite diverse, quite powerful for mages. Their research ability is 17, that's alright. Sacred, so they can take a bless. They cause fear, which means if your enemy has low morale, they can make them rout without exchanging blows, basically. They are poison resistant 5, which is not the best, not the worst. It depends on the strength of the poison, really. That's a weak poison resistance, I think. They can swim, which means they can cross rivers without bridges and without waiting for winter, for the river to freeze over, which can be useful. Swamp survival. In swamp they take less resources and they can move without penalties in there. Supply bonus, once again, that's from his nature magic, and he has a tattoo, like pretty much all but few units in this army. So that's our commanders. Now, for units, we have a Sauromatian archer. You start with some of them and you won't be using them again, I don't think. They're quite precise, but there are better things to do with your money than do this. Androphag archer is slightly upgraded, he has a poison bow, which I would be more likely to use really. It's poison of 5. So with friendly fire in the game, that can be bad depending on what charges your enemies. Lancers, your basic cav, very fast, very good at getting behind the enemy army and sniping commanders. Raiders are your horse archers with composite bows. Sauromatian lancers are kind of a mix of the previous two. They have a lance, but they also have a composite bow. Not as fast as the lancers, but they do quite nicely. Sauromatian raider is another variant, basically. You will notice that a lot of this cav is just a variant of itself. Sauromatian cataphract is just a heavy cav. Quite nice protection, but quite nice defense skill as well, but other than that, nothing to write home about. Now, Hydra hatchlings, they are amazing on paper, but they die fast. So they regenerate 10% of their hit points, which is 2.5 points per turn, but their protection is garbage. So they won't last long, even with that regeneration, because the enemies will just, well, cut them down before they can regenerate. They are blunt and pierce resistant, which is fine. That means they take half damage from those, but it's not enough. It's not enough in my opinion. They are susceptible to fire, which if you're fighting a fire nation, that's gonna wreck ya. And they are poison resistant, which is good because they have a poison cloud. They are cold-blooded, which means they get exhausted in cold provinces faster. So if you are fighting anyone with cold, yeah, they are almost as badly screwed as against fire. Not quite, but almost. They can swim, which means they can cross rivers without penalties. They have swamp survival, which is good. They have recuperation, which... Now, afflictions happen to you during battle, but they stay afterwards. So if somebody wounds your unit, that unit is going to stay wounded unless it is healed. Recuperation, and healers are rare, by the way, very, very rare. Recuperation lets you kind of sort of circumvent that, meaning that they will, on their own, heal some afflictions. It's an animal, so there is spells and things that affect animals that it would be susceptible to. It spreads poison around it. It's undisciplined, which means you can only put them in a group and send them on. You cannot give them orders. And they cannot be surrounded on the account of being hydras and having, well, a couple of heads. Yeah, it has 3 heads, it has 2 lesser and one proper head. And its big brothers cost absolute unit of gold, 200 gold. And you can only recruit 1 at a time. You cannot mass those guys. They are slightly better than the hatchlings, but once again you cannot mass them, so they are useless to you. Because they have a better protection, they are massive. You can fit only 1 per square, but they have a bunch of attacks at quite alright attack skill and doing quite alright damage, and each of them is poisonous. And they cause fear. Less fear than the Manflayers, however. They have many more hit points, and they regenerate 8 per turn, so they could survive feasibly for a little while. but because of the cost and the fact that you can already recruit one, and the fact that they have to start within your side of the field on the battle, and the fact they poison the area around them with the friendly fire as well, and they are undisciplined, so you cannot give them commands properly. They will just go for the nearest enemy, and yeah, there is too many downsides. It's on paper they are great, but because of the limited recruitment stuff and things like that, you cannot mass them. You cannot do anything. You cannot do anything proper with them. When I was practicing this nation, I thought they would be great for your initial push, but it takes too long to get them recruited to do any sort of a push. Now we're gonna move over to the two best units, I think, in the army, just because of what you can do with them, with what we are going to do. You have an Androphag, which we won't use, for a very specific reason. It's combat speed 16. It's faster than a human, slower than a horse by a significant amount. Now the other unit is also slower than a horse, but it's slightly faster than this one. It has a Snake 2, it's Swamp Survival and Swimming, and they are Sacred, which means they can take a Bless. I think they are overall slightly better than the unit we are going to be using, which is Oyorpata. But Oyorpata has, I believe, more tattoos, which gives them more invulnerability, and they are slightly faster. They don't have that poison resistance and all that, but it only matters if we have Hydras in the army, and we won't. It also matters if the enemy has a poison attacks, but that's rare and far between, unless we are fighting some sort of an underwater nation. But at that point we'll have plenty of ways to deal with that if we have to go underwater. I think they are better at defense but worse at attack. But yeah, those are going to be mainstay of our army. Apart from a unit I kind of skipped over a second ago, which is Sauromatian Amazon. They are going to be our... It's not ideal, but they will be holding the line. Those will be the guys that will take the brunt of the enemy. And with the tattoos they can do that reasonably well. I mean, the protection is alright. It's on the heavier side of infantry. Their defense skill isn't amazing, but it will do. They have a shield, they have a spear. Length matters in a way. Each weapon has a different length, from 0 I think to 5. And if you have a lower length weapon than your enemy, the enemy has a chance to, well, convince you not to get too close. I think it's done on a attack skill check, so if you have a sword of length 1 and I have a spear, it's much more likely I'll keep you at a distance. With exception of mindless units that don't care and they will just get damaged as if you pass that skill. Obviously, the longer your weapon, the more difference between your weapon and the enemy weapon, the more pronounced the effect is, but that's beside the point. So we start with foresight. We start with the Great Cauldron, which allows us to recruit pretty much all of the man-eater units, and it also produces 2 blood slaves per turn, which is brilliant because looking for blood slaves destroys your economy slightly. It causes unrest, which causes deaths in the province, which causes less income. Now later on, when you have plenty of provinces, that doesn't matter. Early on, having a free influx of even 2 slaves, it's not much, because most spells require 1 at least in combat. But yeah, it's good. It's good to have some free ones. It's good to have freebies. We have the Bitter Stream, which gives us death gems used in death magic and water gems used in water. magic. I forgot to mention that our Oyorpata are also capital only, which is a bit sad, but we can work around that. Then we have the Enchanted Isle, which gives us some nature gems, and Swamps of Pythia, which gives us the hydras that we are not going to use. Shame really, but alright. Okay. Brilliant. Moving on. God creation. We are going to go with what's called a rainbow mage, because that lets us search for more magic sites and all that. I know it's if you haven't played this game before, that's a lot to take in, but don't worry. There is different types of gods. You have Dominion 1, which are very cheap, apart from the Vampire Queen, which we are definitely not gonna use. Although she has some amazing things going for her. She's too expensive for what we want, and the cost of her getting new magic is also quite high, so we are gonna avoid them. I think we are gonna go with a Serpent King, but that's neither here nor there. We have Dominion 2 gods, which, with exception of the Master Lich and Ghost King, pretty much all of them can be used if you take them awake to expand early in the game. Dragons especially, very good. You just tell them to attack rear flank of the enemy and they will fly up around the enemy and either torch them, freeze them, or cover them in poison, depending on the dragon type. Basically, any of the great creatures are great at doing that. Now, Dominion 3 side of it has even more of those monsters, including some that are better at expanding than others. For example, Titan of the Forge. He's more of a master smith than anything else, and he has a limp. So he's not the best in combat. He will still wreak havoc on independent provinces if you kit him outright, but his main strength is he's very good at forging items. On the other hand, you have things like, say, the Great Archon, which his basically role in life is to come into a province and bully it until it decides to join you. He also has an Inspiring Researcher bonus, which is quite good. The exception in the Dominion 3, I will explain Dominion in a second, is the Demi-Lich, which is immortal, inanimate. It's a Demi-Lich. He's cheap, his magic is cheap, but he cannot move about. So you would take this guy if you just want to cast a lot of ritual spells and forge a lot of items, but not actually go anywhere. Then you have Dominion 4 things, and this is where things start getting interesting, and grimdark in some cases. For example, the Oracle is just a spirit possessing a fountain. And to communicate with his followers, it makes them choose a child, blind it, and tie it up next to the fountain so it can speak for it. At the age of 13, it's killed and replaced with a new one. And the game is quite grimdark in that way. But the Dominion 4 chassis have one thing in common in most cases, is that they are immobile. They cannot leave the province, they cannot move the province, but they are a nightmare to try and kill. Absolute nightmare to try and kill. We are going to go with a Serpent King, just because he's a poison resistant and he's a shapeshifter and he costs basically peanuts. He is cheap, very very cheap, and his new magic paths are cheap. So we're gonna take him. You may notice that his picture here is different. It's because he's a shape changer. So he can change into a snake if in trouble. Let's start with the obvious thing on the top. You have your different magic types, and what we are going to do is put 4 or 5. I want 5 in nature to get a recuperation effect, which is incarnate only, which means for that to take effect your god has to be awake. So this is what the bless is for. When you cast a bless spell, it applies all the available. By that I mean if it's incarnate, it won't happen if the god is not on the field. If the god is dead, you don't get that. But it will apply all the effects that we have here to a sacred unit. So recuperation, it will let all sacred units heal outside of the battle, which is good. That gets rid of afflictions. And then we are gonna add 3 blood, 3 death, 3 astral. Now there is 2 ways to get bless points. You can either go heavy into one path, and anything above 4 gives you additional points to bless. Starting at 4 you get 4, and then each one gives you another one. Or you can split it between the sorcerer's paths, which is the astral, death, nature and blood, or the elemental paths, which is fire, air, water, earth. And if you have 3 in each of the paths, it gives you bless effect, gives you 3 points for each of them. I'm not explaining it very well, but it doesn't matter in the long run. So what we want is, we want magic weapons, so we can hit invulnerable and magical creatures. And we want withering weapons, which makes your enemies decay on the field of battle, which is amazing. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do magic weapons. Notice that so far only one of them is incarnate. So if our god were to die, our units will still have the other blesses. It's just they won't recuperate anymore, which not ideal, but yeah, you know how it goes. We also going to give them Strength of the Flesh for more damage. And I think that's going to be our bless. Dominion. Now that's the important thing. That's Dominion Scales, I believe they call this part. So Dominion is represent how powerful presence in the world your god is. So just rack it up to 5. You want it on 5. And you may notice I went into negative design points. We're going to try and fix that in just a second. You don't want lower than 5, preferably you want something like 6 or 7, but with the current thing I have, that's not going to happen. I'm going to increase the heat by 1, because a lot of our units are... what's it called? Cold-blooded, which means they don't function very well in our... in cold climate. That means, however, the only units in my dominion that can cross water will be the things that can swim, unless there is a bridge. And that brings us up to 11. I could, and I think I will, add it to one of the paths, just in case we can find some sites for it. And it's obviously this is not the most efficient way to do this, but I think it's time to start moving on. Yeah, so obviously you can min-max this to hell and back, but I'm not that good, so I'm just gonna go with what I have. We're gonna stick with a random name, it doesn't matter. So, game settings, number of starting provinces 1, you can change that. With 1 you only start with a capital. If you bring it up you start with more provinces, makes for a faster game. Strength of Independent, that makes it 5 I think is the average. It depends on that. It depends how heavily defended the neutral provinces are. Special site frequency. Each age has a different starting thing, but it's 60% for each province to have a site, which we're gonna keep. We're gonna keep everything else standard. Random events are rare, which is alright. Story events are disabled. Story events can be useful but are mostly annoying, making you move your units away from front lines and doing different patrolling and stuff like that. Score graphs are disabled. We're gonna enable that just so I can show them to you. Hall of Fame 10, global enchantment slots 5. Yeah, I'm gonna keep everything as is. And we're gonna stay on Thrones of Ascension. So points required 4 and thrones in the world 4. I'll explain how they work in just a second. And we're gonna start the game. Finally. In the beginning there was chaos, and now the wheel has started to turn once again. This is basically a little bit of a blurb explaining to you what's actually happening. The previous supreme god, the Pantocrator, the ruler of all, as it were, just straight out stood up and left. And now there is a power vacuum. And obviously you want to fill that power vacuum. And we start next to a throne. Brilliant. So first we're gonna change shape on our, well, pretender, and then tell him to research. I'm gonna send the scout out to start scouting, and I'm gonna tell Lycus to become the prophet. Basically you can see that he's just a standard chieftain. Making somebody a prophet makes them sacred and makes them priest level 3, which we'll need for what we want to do with the army. I will get back to this next time, the army setup thing. I'll just start by recruiting 1 warrior sorceress. I want a couple, but that's in a minute, and then as many of those Oyor Patas as I can, and then fill the gap in. Never mind, don't have enough resources. Oyor Patas as we can, which is 4 at the moment, but as we start expanding, it's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. Oof, where to start? So on the on the top left we have the province status, and clicking between different provinces, it gives you a name, the number of the province. That number here is the number of the province. It's like an index thing. This is a wraparound map, so don't get confused. It's we are still in the same place, but as we scroll up, it's gonna loop around, and same with left and right. So if you see me in 2 places at once, that's what it means, but we are gonna play a little bit more zoomed in, so it's not confusing. The type of province, so for example, Sauromatia is a mountain province with low income, great resources, and more potential for magical sites. It doesn't matter on the home province, because it's always presumed to be fully searched, hence your national things, but you can search other provinces for magical sites. I will demonstrate that as soon as we start getting some conquering going on. Your population, from where your supplies and income are derived from. Supply usage, so my whole army in here takes 11 supplies out of 852 available in the province. Income from Sauromatia alone is 328 is it pounds, or it's gold. It's non-disclosed currency. It produces 81 resources, which makes difference when you are buying more armored units. When the unit it's more armored, it requires more resources, and so on and so forth. You can recruit. You have a pool of 236 recruitment points, which I think symbolizes the fighting age people in your population, and 2 points for commanders, which makes a difference because each commander costs a different amount of recruitment points. Most of them cost 2, some of them cost 1, and some of them cost 4, which means it takes 2 turns to recruit them. I will go through that in just a second. Defense is that's your local local militia. Unrest is, well, it's how upset the province is with you at the moment. And corpses is how many unburied corpses are in the province. It makes a difference for some nations where you can revive those corpses into undead, but they also decrease over time. So I think when you have a lot of corpses also, that might be causing disease, but I'm not 100% on that. Then to the right of that we have our nation breakdown. So Kelefu, god of Sauromatia, his titles are The Shadow, Drinker of Blood. So Shadow we get because it's either High Death or High Astral, I'm not quite sure. Drinker of Blood is obviously because of the blood magic we took, and Guardian of the Dead, that's definitely because of the death magic we have. And to the right you have all your different options. You can change map filters, what displays, and I'm gonna just crank it on fully so we can see what's going on. To the left you have your commanders. I won't go into in depth what you can do with them, but you can equip them with different equipment and all that, and clicking on the word below them saying what they are doing can let you change what they are doing. Like us, yeah, I want him to be empowered. We have statistics, which gives you an idea of what's in the world. So we have 4 different thrones. You have to conquer an amount of ascension. You have to get an amount of ascension points to become a new god, and as you can see, each throne gives you 1 point in this case. Throne of Pestilence is gonna be a pain. It causes diseases all over the world. We want the Throne of Low though. That's a good one. You can see what other nations are in the game. So we have, oh, tell me it's not so, no, it's Kailasa. Fuck that. Uri's pain in the bottom. Kailasa is a nation of monkeys. When you click on the name of the pretender, you can see what their nation has. Xibalba is imagine if it's difficult to explain. This is like the Aztec underworld type of dealie. They sacrifice people to increase their dominion over the world, and it's all about blood and darkness, and yeah, quite powerful nation when you know what you're doing, apparently. And we have an underwater nation of Atlantis, which that means we are not getting in the water. There is no way I will be able to beat Atlantis in their home turf. However, they can get on land quite easily. So Atlantis is gonna be pain in my back. Oof. I'm gonna skim over this because this is gonna take forever. You have different schools of magic. Each turn you generate an amount of research points depending on who and how many of them are researching. We have 39 now because our pretender is doing research, but as soon as he starts moving about looking for sites, that's gonna drop. We have conjuration magic, which lets you summon things, alteration magic that lets you change things, Evocation, that's your fireballs and lightning bolts. Construction, it's what it sounds like clockwork soldiers and constructing things out of magic, including forging magic items. Enchantment, it lets you enchant things and buff your unit, and that's where the Awakened Tattoo is located, so we're gonna go straight to enchantment level 3. Thaumaturgy is that's a catch-all. That's like all the different stuff that didn't come up under the other things. So communion is powerful, horror marking is powerful, and all that. It's like a miscellaneous magic path. For example, augury lets you scry for firesides. But in the same school you have teleport, which lets you move between provinces. It's miracle making. That's what it means, thaumaturgy. So it's everything that didn't fit into any of the other ones goes into thaumaturgy, with the exception of blood magic, which has its own path. If you have a blood strong nation, the only things you usually need is blood magic and construction, and everything else be damned. Oh, I don't want to research that. And that's because blood magic is everything to do with blood. Attack spells, summoning spells, everything. And later, blood magic is incredibly powerful. However, I do believe with select few spells that aren't, which I can see only 2 so far. Yeah, only 2. Leeching Touch and Pain Transfer. Everything requires a sacrifice, including battlefield spells. That's not exactly true. Okay, sorry, 3. Blood Boil as well, but it requires you to have some fire. That's not true for any other school. The stuff that does require you to spend resources, sacrifice gems, is the most powerful things that you can do. For example, for 1 gem, actually for 2 death gems, you can affect the whole battlefield with Wailing Winds, which is like casting terror on the whole battlefield, causing morale checks, including your own units, keep in mind. So obviously Wailing Winds, perfect for undead nations, because you don't care about morale. Well, nations, I say nations, armies as well. You can be not an undead nation, but with some difficulty you could field an army of undead if you really want to, but it's difficult. So we're gonna go enchantment level 3, and then we're gonna switch to construction. Although I do have a lot of... I will need construction now anyway for magic boosters. But I also want alteration for a Mother Oak. It costs 50 gems, it's a global enchantment, but it grants you 10 nature gems a month, so in 5 months it usually pays for itself. But that doesn't matter so much, because the way gem economy works in Dominion is a little bit weird in my opinion. It doesn't matter how fast it pays for itself. What matters is it allows you to spend many more gems per turn. So yeah, you invested 50 and you think, oh, that's 50 loss. But to get those 50 you were getting only 6 a month, say. Now you're getting 16 after you cast this, which lets you do many more things at once. Lets you cast more swarm spells per turn and, I don't know, summon more creatures per turn, or do Army of Giants more times per turn. Which, which enlarges every single unit on the battlefield under your purview, or it lets you polymorph more times, and Polymorph is a funny spell. I have never used it, but on paper it looks bloody amazing. It has an area effect, so it affects 10 squares from 25 squares away. Precision isn't all that, but if you are, it's a late game spell, so the armies you're gonna be dealing with are enormous. So it's chances of missing are low. Costs absolute ton of fatigue. Requires two gems, and it can be resisted, and it doesn't affect friendly units. Oh, thank goodness for that. And undead, mindless, or inanimate. But a average soldier, it will change into a pig, which is going to be incredibly easy to slaughter, as you can imagine. Disintegrate is another powerful spell, but this one doesn't cost gems, mostly because I'm guessing it's one person only. So to actually wipe an army with that, you would need an absolute unit of mages. There is a lot of fun spells in Dominions. A lot of fun spells. For example, Army of Rats requires 5 gems, and it covers entire battlefield in. It makes the entire army of enemies become a size smaller and lose morale. Or Utter Dark, which just says, you see that big light bulb in the sky? Well, I don't want to anymore, and just switches the sun off. However, that can be countered with a conjuration spell. That's called Second Sun, which creates another sun. It's absolutely amazing. Oh, you can also awaken a Tarask, which which if you play the D&D, you can imagine what that is. I'm not sure how useful it actually is, but yeah. You can also get mercenaries, but we are Malka's Green Man, 25 men, and they want 150 gold. It can be useful when you are in a pinch. At the moment, we are not. Now, going back to recruiting units. Each unit has 3 different costs, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. It costs gold, resources, and either recruitment or commander points. And the obviously, depending on the type of the unit, you pay different amounts of different things, and gold represents just the monetary value you have to spend on equipment. Resources, it represents, how difficult that equipment was to get, and recruitment points is basically how difficult the unit is to train, from what I understand. So obviously it's easier to train a foot soldier than it is to train a warrior riding a lizard. On the other hand, if you want a cheap resource-wise, animals are quite cheap because, well, you're not going to give them any equipment, so they only cost 1 resource. But compensating for that, they usually cost more gold and sometimes more recruitment points. Or in the case of Hydra, it's just absolutely bloody stupid, and you spend tons of money on them and you can still only recruit 1 a month, so absolutely useless. And some commanders take more points than others. You can see a Witch King takes 4 commander points, while Beastmasters only take 1. Sorry, Hydra Tamers. I'll go through army setup on the next turn. So, end turn. And myself, Kailasa, and Atlantis have chosen the prophets. The Xibalba hasn't done that yet. But We can deal with that. So I've got one of those sorceresses already. So 45 gold, 180, 9 research, 7 research. Yeah, I'm gonna start popping out spirit guides just so I get some research done. I'm gonna wait for Orifia to get the Awakened Tattoo before I do anything serious with her. And we are going to set up the army slightly. So fire closest, put them up front, attack rear, sorry, hold, attack rear. So they will stand about for 2 turns and do nothing when you tell them to do that, which is fine. Our prophet is going to cast the Divine Blessing, which affects the whole field, and then I'm gonna tell him to hold or cast spell for 1 turn, and then just cast spells, stay behind troops, you should be fine. And ideally I wouldn't mix day 2 because those guys are much slower, but I need a unit to start putting them in, and yeah. So we're gonna get 5 more of them. Actually 4 more of them. Yeah, 5 more, because I cannot recruit any number of Amazons at the moment, and that's no good. Yeah. So if you look at my holy points, 5 is the maximum I can recruit anyway. Because each sacred unit requires a holy point. We can get more holy points by building temples, but that's just gonna happen in a second. So 20 archers, infantry, 30. I would love this province, but heavy cavalry, heavy cav is going to rip straight through my front line, because my front line it's only made of archers at the moment. So I'm going to tell my prophet to go and attack this province here, Sauromatia. It's not as good, but it does have some income. We don't know what the supplies are in there, but that's alright. I'm not gonna be using that for the supplies anyway. It has 30 resources, and because I have a fortress in my main, well, original capital, it will pull resources for each neighboring province that's under my control. So part of the tax from Sauromatia will go to Sauromatia, letting me recruit more units. I will want to go and get the throne at some point, but not right now, and we already have enemy dominion right there, and I don't know whose that is, and I don't like that. It's next to water, so I'm betting that that's a stupid place for Atlantis to be. Unless it's spread through there somehow, and I have a neighbor somewhere around here. Time for my spy to do his work and start moseying over there. Yeah, I need more of my sacreds on the field to actually deal with 20 pale ones. They are giant intelligent olms. And by giant I think they are size 4, they are quite dangerous. But because of the bless I have, as long as I have enough of them to get into combat, I'm gonna kill them all. Because as you can see, my prophet is always blessed, and he has a withering weapons and magic weapons. It's amazing. Right, not much more for this turn, I don't think, so we're gonna end that. So Yeah, we are moving on in our research, which is brilliant. We want Awakened Tattoo. It's gonna make life much easier. And there was a battle in Smacia. Smacia, I don't know how to pronounce it. Let's pause it. So as you can see, my units are in the formation I set them up in. I'm gonna go into some detail on the top left, and looking at the enemy, they have light infantry, a single commander, some archers, a single heavy infantry, he ain't gonna last long, and a cloud mage with 3 gems. Ooh, I suspect somebody will be throwing lightning. Okay. Let's see what it does. So, our archers... Oh, it's a shame he didn't hit. So the Air Mage is doing a lot of self-buffing, which is understandable. And our Lancers and Maidens are currently trying to encircle the enemy. Some of them got caught in that infantry squad, don't know why. But the rest of them are going down nicely. And we lost one of the Oyarpatas. It doesn't matter. It's also expensive. And there we go. That should be it. So we lost some cavalry. I wonder how much of it had to do with friendly fire. I think I should change the scripting for my archers to go after enemy archers. That's might be easier. So I lost 3 lancers, which is fine. I don't care about them. I want to replace them with Oyarpatas as soon as possible. 1 Oyarpata, that's a little bit painful, and archers, which are chaff. Not ideal, but we'll deal. We will put some province defense in here, so the locals don't get too uppity. And I hate doing that, but I may need to... No, not quite enough to get another one of those. Resources. I need more recruitment points. Right, don't matter too much. I do need more holy points though. How does that work? I need to click on the temple, I think. There it is. There it is. Number of temples 1, Dominion strength 5. Okay. Yeah, need so every 5 temples I get another holy point, so I can recruit more of those Oyarpatas, which is fine. What I really want to do is get a second fort going as soon as I can. That will probably mince me. So we are gonna head back to the... I hate doing that, but we're gonna head back to the capital. Get some more of those Oyarpatas and get another commander going, so we can have 2 flanks flanking. One of horses, one of the lizard girls, and see what's what. Our spy is still moving that direction to figure out whose dominion is that, and it's quite powerful, looks like. It spreads rather quickly, and I don't like that, because Keben is right next to me. Okay, and turn, I suppose. Okay, so army setup. All of you and all of you. Hold attack rear. they are gonna flank from the bottom, and I'm gonna move them a little bit closer because they are slower. So she can cast a couple of spells. I could give her a Blood Slave, but it's bleeding one person for one Blood Slave. It's not really worth it in my opinion. She'll be useless with blessings, but what we can do with her is... Bark Skin only affects caster. Never mind. Tangle Vines and Potions. Tell you what, you are going to hold 2 turns and then attack rearmost. And you're gonna stick right in that squad there. Just because I don't have any good spells to give her yet. No Awakened Tattoo. When she gets Awakened Tattoo, I'm gonna tell her to do it twice. Because it's an area of effect spell, I believe. Okay, so what do we have here? 100 enemy units. Jaguar Tribe can be dangerous, but not necessarily fully deadly. I think our Dominion is fighting theirs at the moment, which is good. 30 infantries. Oh, let's risk that one. Can I start? No, I need more resources. I need more recruitment points. I need more everything. But ideally, what I should be able to do is, if I get a second fort built, maybe even here, just so it's close, I could, and I probably will, utilize it to pump out infantry while Sauromatia just pumps out my sacred units. So, enchantment. So, few more turns. There was a battle in Snowfort. I would have started moving my my pretender to start searching for sites. However, I need that research more. So we have 3 commanders, a whole bunch of militias, which is what was expected. That's brilliant. Divine Blessing has been cast, so now our maidens have magic and withering weapons, which is nothing to sneeze at, really. Let's speed it up a little bit. And they went straight into the mass. That's fine. Because that allows our lancers to get around the back of the enemy. We'll see in a second if we lost anyone in this battle. Okay, so what's our losses? None. Complete and utter victory. Lovely. And I suspect strongly it's because of the withering weapons as well. Because that does additional damage. Okay. We don't have quite enough money to start doing a temple. 40 enemy units, heavy infantries and slingers, but I want Sauromatia to be able to do as much as they can. Not quite. I don't even remember if the recruitment points... Fortification. So 30... Yeah, not sure if... Doesn't matter, we need more provinces anyway. Let's risk it for a biscuit, eh? And our spy is still moving through the swamps. So hopefully, if don't mess up, I should be able to move around back into here, pick up some more units. Maybe assault the throne. And New famous hero. That's good. There we go. Atlantis is on land. Oh boy. Oh boy. So what do they have? They have living pillars. Oh, and they have an enlarged bless as well. Okay, that's gonna be painful. Yep. And they have deep ones. That's normal. That's fine. And that's their profit. That's their profit. And he looks dangerous. So what's their bless? So I get +2 morale, +1 precision. So that's shock and cold. Shock and precision. That's gonna be air. Morale. That can be a number of things. So their god at least has 4 air. Cold. That's water. That doesn't surprise me. Defense skill, I'm not sure what that is. Swarm survival, that's nature. Enlargement is also nature, so it's high nature, high water, high air. Water definitely, because combat speed I think is there. Inspirational and leadership, that might be fire. Oof, that's a hell of a god. Yeah, so AI went for something completely and utterly stupid. But now, granted, they're only fighting cavemen, but cavemen are still quite... Oof. Yeah, and they had almost no losses apart from the shamblers, which are chaff anyway. So, yeah, so that is Atlantis, and that is going to be painful, fighting them. Right, let's see if we can find somebody else. So I need to establish myself as soon as possible. So if Atlantis is running about, that's worrying. Also, spoiler alert, I think we won that battle. Oi. Oi. Oh, a bit of lag there. So he has blessing. Is he sacred? Yes, he is. But he blessed, but there is no bless effect because he doesn't have a god. Ah, that's funny. His commander is very nicely screened, so it's gonna be a pain to get around the side there. Come on, push through. I see the commander here fighting as well. There we go, the warrior sorceress. Might have lost one. Oh, I need to start replacing those archers as soon as. Oh, sorry, I turned up the battlefield for a second. Yeah, so that looks like it. That's it, and I haven't lost any. Perfect. Go to province, get 10 defense for the unrest. Right. I think I'm gonna swing down, get this one as well, because that should be piss easy. Yeah, definitely need a new fort. I think I'm going to aggressively build it the Atlantean way. So I think I'm gonna try and push down through there, through Gintark, and then build a fort in Grey Mountains. Oh no. So what do you have? A never healing ward. That's fine, could be worse. 20 less. Anything I can forge for him to help out with that? No. How far away are we? 2 months. 2 months, and then I'm gonna start hopping about provinces, trying to find more gems. Is there anything I can do to help on this? No. What rituals can you cast? Reanimation and Revive King. Now, Mount King could be useful, but not at the moment. Don't have enough stuff to deal with that. How many do we have? 10. That would basically double my amount of troops down here. But... oh well, let's keep going. Unexpected event, 350 people left. Okay. Anglavia. So this is probably gonna be the last of the ones that I show you. Unless there is something interesting to see, I won't be bothering too much. Oh boy. Yeah, so... somehow... somehow the morale has been broken, and I don't know why. He doesn't cause fear, does he? No. Right, and that's it. The army is dead. We lost 1 archer. Ah, not too bad. Yeah, I think that will be the last one of the like generic ones I show you, unless there is something that interesting that happens in the interim. Can I take this 30 cav? Maybe, maybe not. But we have to go through there anyway to get back into the thing. For now, let's stop recruiting those and get some chaff. We lost 1 lancer and 1... yeah, that's expected. Ah, there we go. Can change the scripting now. Remove that. Cast a specific spell. Awaken tattoos. I would rather have her be nature 2, because that lowers the fatigue cost. But that will do, pig, that will do, and it affects 5 squares. Not sure how many squares this is, but she's smack down in the middle of that, so she should be alright. In the meanwhile, if we recruit 1 more of them there, so we can have a second flank going. And you are going to start hopping around and trying to get us more gems. I know I haven't spent any yet, but that gets there. And apparently one of my commanders caught a frog and is keeping it as a pet. What? What commander has a pet frog now? I mean, sure, I'll pick it up on the way with my guy. I'm guessing if I cast Gift of Reason on it or something, it will change into something. But why? Either way, you search for magic sites, you pick up hold an attack closest, fire archers. Okay, so those guys move back, you go to the front, do a double line out of that, hold attack rear, move you there, gonna move the calves slightly down because they're faster, and you cast a specific spell, awaken, then attack rear, and she is nature too, so that's perfect. And right in the middle of the square, that's perfect. Oh. And Orifia didn't have any orders apart from those 2 tattoos. Now, 40 pale ones. Can we do it? Probably not, but I'm just about to finish the recording anyway, so. And we found the monkeys. They're on the other side of the pond. Perfect. Let's see if we can find the last nation, which is Xibalba. So we found the Labyrinth of Skulls, which I believe is going to give us more death gems, so we can start doing a death-themed army. And I'm showing you this one just because, I mean, bloody hell, look at those guys. Okay, yeah, they're size 3, not 4. But they do not eat, they absorb nutrients from the ground somehow. But yeah. So withering weapons are brilliant against those guys in high numbers, because there is only so many times you can roll your magic resistance. I mean, you can roll it against every attack, but the more attacks you get hit by, the more chances there are that you're gonna get murdered. And there we go, look at that, that squad immediately on contact, gone. And this guy is decaying. No survivors. How did we do on our side? And no losses. That's what we like to see. So what throne do we have? Throne of Law. Fine enough, that's the one I wanted. To claim a throne, you need your prophet, god, or a very high level priest. And Atlantis gets to fuck off in a second. Either way, thank you very much for watching. I might continue this, might not. Not sure, we'll see. Ta-ta.